It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the films of July 28th, 1995. Four movies to look at today, so let's just jump on into it. And we'll start off with one of the biggest movies of the summer, and not for the reasons you might think. Even though this did become somewhat of a high-grossing film, it was a massive, underperforming film because of how big the budget was, the most expensive film made at the time, as Kevin Costner's Waterworld. So, like I said, Waterworld at the time was the most expensive movie ever made, 172 million to 175 million dollars. I mean, which is still pretty big even for today's standards. But 1995, most of these movies did not have that big of a budget, so there was a lot of high expectations going into this movie, and it also didn't help that there was a lot of behind the scenes. There was a lot of behind the scenes controversy as well because the movie had a lot of cost overruns, production setbacks. I mean, this thing started filming all the way back in 1993, and it didn't get released until 2 years afterwards. And most notably, the director of this, Kevin Reynolds, who had previously worked with Kevin Costner before on Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which was a much bigger success, but he actually quit the film before its release owing to heated battles with him and Costner, and thus their relationship kind of fell apart after this, even though Reynolds still received credit as a director. Like, the score was also changed completely. They had a completely different composer. Mark Isom was the composer before James Newton Howard came in. Josh Whedon came in to do script rewrites, and he later described it as 7 weeks of hell. I mean, there's just so much controversy behind this movie, but also there was a lot riding on this movie. I mean, Universal put a lot of money into this movie, and it had to make its money back some way or another. And like I said, it was one of the highest grossing films that came out that year, but as far as the movie itself goes, it was seen at the time as the kind of the equivalent to some of the other notorious bombs at the time. Fish Tar related to Ishtar, Kevin's Gate as related to Heaven's Gate. It did make, at least it made its budget back after the worldwide numbers. Like, I think it made over 264 million worldwide, but of course, that's not taking into account the percentage of the box office gross the theaters retained, also home video sales, TV sales. But over time, Waterworld did eventually become profitable, but unfortunately not at the time when it was needed. And it was also coming at a time when you have to remember that movies centered around the water, especially action movies, do not usually make for big hits. I mean, Universal had that same thing happen to them 8 years ago with Jaws the Revenge in 1987. And then in 1995, you also had another movie that was mostly set around the water, Cutthroat Island, which is still considered one of the biggest bombs of all time. So there was a lot of things behind the scenes of this movie that really dinged it at first. But you know what? Over almost 30 years later, does the movie actually still hold up? I mean, not even hold up. Has it actually gotten better over time? Well, I won't say better, but I will say it's a lot better than I think a lot of people gave it credit for. I mean, the futuristic setting, the idea that the Earth is now covered in water, that's a fun premise. That's a fun idea. Unfortunately, the characters themselves are not really all that memorable. I mean, Kevin Costner is basically just a watered-down version, quite literally, of Mad Max from the Mad Max series, and none of these characters whatsoever that he hangs around with are that enjoyable at all. Like, Jean Tripplehorn gets on your nerves really quickly. Tina Majorno, who we've seen in some movies before, and has been proven to be a decent actress, like, she's just there to be the comic relief, and she gets really annoying really fast. And Dennis Hopper, man, like, I don't know who your agent was at that time, because after this and then before this Super Mario Brothers, like, yeah, I hope he fired his agent after this, because, man, you made some bad choices in this case. But, yeah, part of the problem with the movie is that the writing isn't all that sharp, the characters aren't that memorable, the acting gets really bland pretty quickly. It tries to force these memorable lines on you that aren't really all that memorable, except for the fact that they're laughingly bad, and just like, I mean, like I said, the idea is very interesting. It kind of falls into that same category we talked about a couple weeks ago with sci-fi movies. Concept is like original sci-fi movies have the biggest problem with them is that they have good ideas, but they can never go all the way through to make something really incredible or really groundbreaking. They always want to try to copy something that had worked previously, and Waterworld was an example of one of those movies. I mean, for the most part, the action sequences, I think, did work okay. Like, I thought they were a ton of fun. I mean, you still have a Waterworld live show that they keep doing that they've done at Universal Studios ever since this movie came out, and it's still running to this very day. So it has had a legacy to it. Um, Really, the character, like the writing, just needed to be a whole lot better. You can definitely tell this movie went through a lot of crazy production problems, and in the end, it really stung it in the end because this is a film that really could have been a whole lot better than what it was. But in the end, it's just kind of a forgettable film. I mean, it's a movie that has so much potential to it just from the premise and the concept alone. And some of the action sequences, like I said, are pretty good. And I'll even say some of the music that they got from James Newton Howard has become memorable of itself. Like, you hear that music all the time now in trailers for action movies and other movies as well. I mean, there is a lot to admire about this movie, but it's mostly It's mostly in the way of the big, overbloated mess of a film that it really is from the story and the character perspective. So, overall, I think Waterworld is kind of a mixed bag. It could have been a whole lot better, but at the same time, it could have been a whole lot worse considering the production history that it had behind it. So that's Waterworld for you. So with that said, let's move on to the next movie, which is Sandra Bullock starring in The Net. So The Net was kind of seen as Sandra Bullock's next test to see how sustainable of a leading actress she could be, because she had just had While You Were Sleeping, which was a big hit, and of course Speed was the year before, as well as Demolition Man a couple of years prior to this. And then you have this movie here, which kind of fit a lot of these action thrillers at the time. They were using is how technology could be used against somebody, and like we've seen movies like this that have been mostly forgettable, like Hideaway we looked at already, Johnny Mnemonic. We still have Virtuosity coming up, as well as a couple of other movies. Like another notable misfire was Ghost in the Machine, and I mean, there's definitely some potential here with this story. I mean, here's the thing though, I think Sandra Bullock is miscasted in this movie because I feel like this movie could have been, if you had gotten somebody else to be kind of in that role. I think Sandra Bullock herself is trying a little bit too hard to really stick with it. I mean, she could be a really good actress in this, but at times it feels like this is a miscasted character. Like, I don't know who else you'd probably get for this. I want to say Julia Roberts maybe, but even Julia Roberts had kind of been steering away from this kind of stuff at this point and trying to be, and eventually became the Julia Roberts that we know her to be as. But you could probably put that all aside if the story was actually very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of potential with what they could do with the premise here, and the problem is the thrill factor just isn't there. It just kind of falls into a typical generic action thriller put in with the modern technology of the time, like the fact that computers can be used to manipulate somebody or hack somebody basically. But it just doesn't really have a lot there to make it stand out or be anything unique or clever. It's just kind of a mediocre movie, to say the least. It's a film that has a lot of potential to it, but unfortunately, the overall script just doesn't really work that well. And I think Sandra Bullock at times can be miscast in this movie. A lot of people in this movie are really miscast. Like Dennis Miller, I don't know why he's in here as a kind of a side character to Sandra Bullock's character. Yeah, I don't know why he's in here, because it feels like a role that he really does not need to be in this movie for. But then again, maybe they had something there, but I just didn't see it. But bottom line, The Net is not really a good movie. Although I will say it does lead to some history, because Entertainment Tonight back in 1995 actually did a story where Sandra Bullock became the first person to buy a movie ticket for a movie on the internet. But that was a bit interesting little piece there to know that she was the first person to ever buy a movie ticket online for a movie, and it was coincidentally for that movie. That's probably the most intriguing thing about this entire thing altogether, that she made history in that way. But other than that, though, this movie is mostly forgettable. I know it launched a series on USA, which ran for about a season, and then there was a direct-to-video sequel. But other than that, though, this movie did not really last. This really did not last very well. It did not have that long-lasting longevity to it. So, yeah, that is The Net for you. So, let's move on to the next movie that we have here, and that is Disney's Operation Dumbo Drop. What a bizarre concept for a movie, especially a movie that takes place in the Vietnam War. It is supposedly based on a real story that actually happened. And but then again, we just had Cocaine Bear, and that was based on a true story. But Cocaine Bear was a much better movie than Operation Dumbo Drop is. But I will say, this movie was not as horrible as it could have been. I mean, just the premise alone, and even that trailer did not sell that movie very well. But it does have some intriguing ideas to it. It does have some engaging, interesting concepts to it. The cast overall is really solid. I mean, there's a reason why you get Danny Glover, Ray Liotta, and Dennis Leary together, and it has a lot of potential there. There's a lot of potential that could be really funny in this. There's times in here where it actually does kind of work, and it's actually really interesting that the story that pans out here. I mean, does it work all the way through? No, not really. But as far as a movie about three military men having to transport this elephant through various different ways through the southern Vietnamese village during the Vietnam War, I was expecting a lot sillier and a lot more ridiculous elements to it, but I mean, for the most part, it kind of was a little bit of a fun film. I'm not going to say it's a classic by any means, or even say it's a great movie overall, but I was expecting a whole lot worse considering the concept of it. But so, I mean, overall, not a bad movie, but not a great one either. Kind of a mixed bag movie. I thought it was all right. Operation Dumbo Drop. When I say all right, I mean I don't think it's anything too special. For a one-time watch, I thought it was just passable. But other than that, though, I'd probably never watch it again. So, with that said, on to the last movie that we have here, and that is Seebach, Midnight Dancers. Another one of the surprisingly many gay-themed movies that we got between 94 and 95, but this is actually from the Philippines, and this is actually the first of a series of 3 gay-themed movies from these two people involved. Mel Chiangolo, I think I'm pronouncing that right, and Ricky Lee, about the lives of macho dancers in the gay bars of Manila. The story revolves around the lives of these 3 brothers who work as the strippers at a gay bar. The oldest, Joel, has a wife and boyfriend. Dennis, the middle brother, steals car radios with his friends. And the youngest, Sonny, dropped out of college and has a transsexual lover. That's pretty much all I know about this, because obviously I didn't really know too much about this movie before I did the research on it. And I mean, I haven't seen the movie, so I can't really say if it's any good or not. But apparently got some positive reviews from the Toronto Film Festival, and it was banned by the Movie and Television Review and Classification Board. So I don't know. I mean, I see here it also got banned in the Philippines as well. So there was a lot there here. But other than that, though, I really don't know too much about this movie in particular. So I can't really say if it's good or not. But I don't know. Maybe it could be something. Maybe it could be something. But as far as I know, it's just something that I know came out this weekend. So I might as well talk about it briefly. So there you go. Seebach, Midnight Dancers is that last film. And so on that note, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. The next time we meet, we have 6 movies to start off August, including Julia Roberts and Dennis Quaid and Something to Talk About. Babe. We also have the aforementioned Virtuosity with Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe. Daniel Stern in Bushwhacked, Jeffrey, and also Unzipped. So 6 movies to look at overall next time around, and we will delve into those on the next episode. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys next time, and until then, as always, take care.